Hey, what up, everybody? Let's see. Whoa, we got some people here. Hey, Crystal, congratulations on being the first comment tonight. Glad you and Bill are here. Parker Miley, what's happening, my man? Parker, I'm going to check on the question you asked me earlier about the Revelation study. Remind me, if you don't hear something from me tomorrow, remind me to check. I need to go back through my old files and see if I can find that study you were asking about. Hi, Dave and Amy Jessen. Hello, Teresa Bitters. Hi, Cheryl. Hey, Audra. Hi, Daryl. Margie and Doug Whitling. Margie, I have a soup container for you sitting right over here on my shelf. I need to make arrangements to get back to you so you can fill it up for me sometime. Hey, Eric Gurman. DW is in the house tonight. Teresa says it was rainy and chilly. It was rainy and chilly today. It's weird. Hi, Janet. It was good to see you guys today. Hi, Angie. Hey, Audra. Oh, yes. You guys were our first stop today, Audra. It was good to see you guys. Hey, Tina Bird. Glad you and Mike are here. Laura made a chocolate cake. Eric, life is good, my man. Hi, Jan. Yeah, we miss all of you too. And hey, Suze. Glad to see you too. Hey, appreciate everybody who stopped by today. We had any of you who watched the services this morning know that I was here until 1:00. We literally had a constant train of people coming through here the entire time. I mean, I don't know how many we had. We must have had 50 people come through after church. So it was really cool to see everybody and appreciate y'all coming out. If you missed today, that's cool. I'll be here tomorrow from 5:30 to 7, prior to the live stream tomorrow night. And would love to have you come by and just say hey. So, hey, Amy, happy Sunday to you too. All right. Well, we are going to, my plan is to finish Joseph tonight. I kind of went through and marked up my paper here so we could skip through and get a few things. Hey, Nikki. Hi, Christina. So we can kind of get through this. Tomorrow night, my plan is to start Job. Here's my new notes for Job that I printed out, and I got them all ready to go. And any of you who've ever read Job know that it's just a lot of stuff there. So we want to work on that. So hey, Kim Kill and Angie, love seeing the shut-ins today. Yeah, that was nice. It was nice to see some of those folks, and they were sure excited to have their YouTube debut as well. So. Any feedback from the service this morning? I really feel like we're getting the hang of these online things. I'd never wanted to be good at that, but I think Daryl and Gene and Josh and Leah this morning were fantastic. So I feel like we're getting good at those. So any feedback from the services this morning? Always looking for that. I thought I'd get the Pastor Tim bobblehead. This one here. Yeah, it's a life-size bobblehead. That's what I got here. So yeah, prayer was best I was offering, Joe. So glad that was good enough. Janine, back from our weekly drive by the lake to check out the bird. 2 beautiful eagles flew over our car. Wow. Yeah, I've seen bald eagles a couple times here recently, out running, and so thanks, Teresa. Eric, thanks. Yeah, the music was fantastic this morning. And hello, Val Cisco. Any word on your lost cat? Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Amy. So, just always glad to have you guys here. We're doing the best we can to get people connected. See, Cheryl, you're learning how to play the game. Yeah, that's good. So I'm glad we had a little influence there. So, all right. Well, great. So I want to give just another minute for some of the stragglers to get in here. Okay, Val. Sorry about that. I got your thing out there. When I'm running down the towpath, I'll be watching for her. So see if I can find your cat for you. So hey, Joyce Koenig, how are you? So all right. All right, Joseph. So we had Ruth this morning. We have Joseph tonight, and we'll have Job tomorrow. So you guys are getting kind of the Old Testament medley going here, and should be a nice time for some conversation and some learning. So yeah. Hey, Jess Skinner, and Amy had soup for dinner. What kind of soup did you have, Amy? I had some fried potatoes and green beans, and they were pretty good. So, Dennis and Trina are in the house. Appreciate you guys coming out. So, yeah, the Germans, I've seen them on the bike trail a few times. They may, or the towpath a few times. They may come up with her too. So, Chinese for dinner. Sorry to hear that. So, all right. Cream of chicken, broccoli, rice soup. Val had some grilled chicken out on the grill. Nice. Okay. For those of you who are going to follow along, we're going to skip ahead in Joseph's story. We're going to go to chapter. Where am I at here? Chapter 40. What is this? Chapter 46, verse 28. That's where we're going to start. Genesis 46, 28. So we're going to skip ahead some of the details and things here. So tacos, nice. Candy and Tim in the house, good. And hey, Janet, yeah, we're glad, Jan, glad you guys are here. So, all right. Okay, so we're going to Genesis 46, verse 28. We're going to skip some of the details of the journey because there's a lot of there's a genealogy in here where they kind of run down all the names of all the kids and everything, and I don't know that that's going to be relevant for our purposes here tonight. So we're going to skip ahead to Jacob and crew actually arriving in Egypt. And hey, Miriam Litch, it was good to see Brian today. He came by after church, and it certainly was good to see him. So, all right. All right. Well, let's embark on the last leg of our journey here, and we're going to be skipping around. So we're going to be skipping around between Genesis 46 and Genesis 50, where we're going to finish up. So that's where we're heading. So let me little piece of housekeeping here. All right, my phone is off, so you guys can feel free to blow up my phone if you feel the need to do that. And throwing stuff on the ground. And let me turn this off so I don't start making a bunch of noise. Okay. All right, cool. All right, so verse 28. At this point, everything has happened. Everybody knows who's alive. Everybody knows what's going on. So the boys or the brothers go back. They collect dad, collect everything, and now they're moving to Egypt to be near Joseph to be taken care of during this famine. So the place where we're going to pick up here in verse 28 is Jacob's arrival. All right. So as they neared their destination, so as the brothers and all the flocks and herds and kids and everybody else that's there with them were nearing their destination, Jacob sent Judah ahead to meet Joseph and get directions to the region of Goshen. So, hey, Linda Burkholder and Jan, why did they include that? You mean the genealogies? You'll find in the Old Testament writers love genealogies, probably because it helped them trace time. If I say right now, I was born in 1975, which I was, even those of you who aren't that old have a concept for when 1975 was and how long ago that was. And that's how we space time. They didn't have calendars in that time. The calendar we use today was invented by the Romans, which was a long, long time later. So in order to denote passage of time, they had to go generations. How many generations ago was this? So by giving genealogies, it would be the same as saying, March 12th, 1984. I mean, it's the same. It's the same thing. So, that's how they dated things. Now we're like, well, that's not very specific. No, it's not. But it's the best they had. And we in our culture today, When we say what time it is, I mean, right now I could say it's, April the 26th, 2020 at 8:09 in the evening. I mean, we can be very, when I say that, you all know what I'm talking about. Well, all that stuff didn't exist at that time. So, so the genealogies was just a method of dating. So we kind of know how much time has passed approximately. So that's why you see so many genealogies at certain places, like the Book of Chronicles and things like that in the Old Testament. Okay, so as they near their destination, Jacob sent Judah ahead to meet Joseph and get directions to the region of Goshen. And when they finally arrived there, Joseph prepared his chariot and he traveled to Goshen to meet his father. So Goshen, this area was the place where this meeting was going to happen. When they finally arrived there, When Joseph arrived, he embraced his father and wept, holding him a long time. That's not at all surprising given everything that's happened. So there was a huge, tearful reunion, again, to no one's surprise. Finally, Jacob said to Joseph, after he kind of got his senses back to him, Jacob said to Joseph, "Now I'm ready to die, since I have seen your face again and know you are still alive." For the brothers to come back to Joseph and say, "Hey," or come back to Jacob and say, "Joseph," why do they all have to have such similar sounding names? Go back to Jacob and say, "Hey, Joseph is still alive." I mean, that sounds just fantastic. I mean, and by fantastic, I mean unbelievable. And so they had to go and do some checking and figure out, what on earth this was about. And again, whenever you hear something fantastic like this, your skepticism is still a little bit there until you witness something you can't deny. Like standing in his presence and getting hugged by the kid that you thought was dead. So that was a way of Jacob couldn't deny that. Okay, here he is. Nothing else I can say. So, Candy, also to prove legitimacy, sure. I mean, there's no DNA tests in the ancient world. So if you want to say you're related to so-and-so, you can't go on Ancestry.com and prove that. You got to be able to say, well, my father, his father, his father, his father, until you get back to where you want to be. So, all those record keeping, that's what it was about. So, yeah, there's a legitimacy thing there as well as passage of time. Okay, so verse 30. Finally, Jacob said to Joseph, "Now I'm ready to die, since I've seen your face and know you are still alive." No more question. And Joseph said to his brothers and his father's entire family. Now, okay, so we've had the tearful reunion. We've had the big hug. We've had the Hollywood moment. I mean, this is legitimately everything gone full circle. So everything is great. A lot of the stuff has been worked out. Now I want you to hear, and I want you to listen very carefully to what Joseph tells his family. That's recorded. I'm sure they talked about more than what's recorded here, but this is the details that the author of Genesis decided to record about their conversation. So listen to this for just a second. And Joseph said to his brothers and his father's entire family, "I will go to Pharaoh and tell him, my brothers and my father's entire family have come to me from the land of Canaan. These men are shepherds and they raise livestock." Okay, nothing terribly shocking here. They have brought with them their flocks and herds and everything they own. Now remember, Joseph said, "I'm going to go to Pharaoh before he sees you guys, and we'll tell him all this stuff, so that he knows, knows about you guys." So they have brought them here their flocks, herds, and everything they own. Then he says, I want you to listen real close to this. "When Pharaoh calls for you and asks about your occupation, you must tell him, 'We, your servants, have raised livestock all our lives, as our ancestors have already done.'" Now, before I read the rest of that verse, pay attention to the fact that he says, "I'm going to tell Pharaoh this before you get there." So he's already going to know. So you're not going to say something shocking because I already told him what I'm telling you to tell him. Now, that seems a little redundant. until you get to this last sentence. When you tell him this, he will let you live here in the region of Goshen, for the Egyptians despise shepherds. Now, that's an interesting piece of information for the author of Genesis to tell us. Now, anybody from this time period who was reading this and was familiar with Egyptian culture would know this. Egyptians don't look at shepherding as an especially prestigious job. It's a job, but it's not a job that we look at that, people who are concerned about their reputation, they don't normally take this job. Shepherds had a reputation for being kind of seedy, which is interesting in the Gospel of Luke. It's the shepherds that come visit the Christ child. I mean, there's a lot of symbolism in that. So the shepherds are kind of the outcasts of society. They can't, deal with culture or whatever. And so they live outside. The thing I want you to see about this, Joseph does not shy away from that. He says, I'm going to tell Pharaoh first, then I want you to tell Pharaoh, and I don't want you to be ashamed of it. Egyptians don't like shepherds, and you know what Egyptians can do? They can deal with it. And if they don't like it, I won't sell them any more food, I guess, or whatever. The thing I want you to see here is Joseph doesn't even have a shade of shame for where he came from. Not even a little bit. Not even the fact that he may be worried that people around the muckety mucks in the hierarchy that he's going to be around may go, Joseph came from a family of shepherds? And Joseph doesn't give any care about that at all. Doesn't bother him in the least. He says, I don't want you to keep it a secret, and to make sure you don't keep it a secret, I ain't keeping it a secret. You want to know why? Because I don't care. He could care less what these Egyptians think. Now compare that again to the Joseph of Genesis 37, who had these, delusions of grandeur, we'll call them. And now he's going to go to the very people who have given him this prestigious power that he has, and we could make the argument that he's earned it. So he has this, and he's not going to shy away from the fact that he came from what would be now considered a questionable background. My friends, do you see growth in that? He's not ashamed of this. He does not care what the Egyptians think. There's no concern about that. If they don't like the fact that I came from a shepherd, I'll have them killed or something. I don't care. Don't bother me none. Friends, that's growth. That he could care less what these people think. He has come to a position in his life that other people's opinion don't affect him much. That is maturity. He doesn't make any attempt to hide where he came from or what he is. And I'm giving you that as sort of the icing on the cake of the proof that Joseph has grown. And I would also contend this is why the author of Genesis, of all the conversation, I'm sure that Joseph and Jacob and all these things here, I'm giving you this as evidence to say that he has come a long way. He's come a long way, baby. And he in all this journey and all this growth, other people's opinion, don't nobody got time for that. And hey, Daryl and Jean, welcome. And that's right, Teresa. The Joseph of Genesis 37. Joseph who? That's right, man. We got a whole different guy going on here. And this guy does not care about his reputation. He doesn't care what people think. That is true power. That is true authority. That is true maturity. Because when you get to that point, the sky's the limit. He's just going to own it. So, all right. So, no shade. Let me make that clear. This entire journey, yes, has been about canceling the famine. Yes, it's been about God's chosen champion to save the world from this coming threat and so on and so forth. All that is true. But what I need you to see here is that Joseph doesn't make any attempt to hide where he came from. In fact, he brought his family there to introduce them to the very people who are going to be like, Hebrews? Shepherds? And Joseph's like, yeah, and you guys can deal with it. Awesome. I mean, it's fantastic. I love the story of Joseph. I know I say that every night. So cool. So no shame. He owns who he is. He is who he is. and you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit, and everybody have a wonderful day. And that's just kind of where Joseph's at. So, all right, with that instruction now, Genesis 47, verse 1. Then Joseph went to see Pharaoh and told him, and again, this is exactly what he said he was going to do. My father and brothers have arrived from the land of Canaan. They have come with their flocks and herds and possessions, and they are now in the region of Goshen. Joseph took 5 of his brothers with him and presented them to Pharaoh. This is the first time we've ever seen the brothers split up. I mean, it's amazing what a little trust can do, right? I mean, we made a big deal about how all 10 of them had to go or none of them went, and now half of them went. 5. And if I recall correctly, I don't even think we know which 5 it was, but it was 5 of them were there. So Joseph took 5 of his brothers with him, presented them to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asked the brothers, as Joseph said he would, what is your occupation? They replied, without hesitation, we, your servants, are shepherds just like our ancestors. We have come to live here in Egypt for a while, for there's no pasture for our flocks in Canaan. The famine is very severe. So please, we request permission to live in the region of Goshen. That's pretty straightforward. Didn't hide anything. We just making a request. And then, remember, Joseph is probably doing the translating here. We're not told that, but I think it's safe to assume somebody's translating, because Pharaoh doesn't speak Hebrew, and the Hebrews here don't speak Egyptian. So probably Joseph is translating. So verse 5. Then Pharaoh says to Joseph, now that your father and brothers have joined you here, choose any place. Choose any place in the entire land of Egypt for them to live. Give them the best land of Egypt. And let them live in the region of Goshen. And if any of them have special skills, put them in charge of my livestock too. All right. Gotta love Pharaoh here, right? First of all, I mean, Joseph is the man. Joseph, dude, for what you've done, you take what you want, boy. That's how it's going to work. And so he puts them out there. They're shepherds. So Goshen had some pasture land. So they're going to, put them out there so they could take care of that. But look at the last thing Pharaoh says. Joseph didn't hint that he was going to say this. Well, let me just point this out to you because it's kind of funny. The very last line he says, and if any of them have special skills, put them in charge of my livestock too. My friends, understand Pharaoh is a, and I don't mean anything bad by this, but he is a shrewd guy, because he's going, and Joseph, if any of them are like you, put them in charge too. I mean, think about what Joseph has done. And he's like, if the apple did too far from the tree and you got some other people who do things as well as you do, yeah, I want them in charge. So to me, I take this as Pharaoh making full recognition that Joseph is just crushing life right now and just knocking every pitch out of the park. And just, everywhere he goes, he's got the Midas touch. Everything he touches seems to go well, even no matter if he's in prison, if he's in Potiphar's house, if he's taking over Egypt, wherever he's at, he tends to make things better. So Pharaoh's like, yeah, if the rest of them are like you, find something to put them in charge of too. I don't care what it is. If they got some skills, let's use them skills and see what we can do. So you got to love Pharaoh here. I don't mind helping these guys out, but look, if they can help me out too, that's icing on the cake right there. So I just find that to be very funny that even Pharaoh's like, if any of these guys are like you, man, put them in charge of something. So that's just Pharaoh playing to the strengths. So, okay. So we got the 5 brothers. We had the introductions. We had all the formality. And Pharaoh was like, find something for these boys to do. Verse 7. Then Joseph brought in his father, Jacob, and presented him to Pharaoh. You want to talk about, look, I know we're going to read, we Americans, we kind of read through this and kind of gloss over it. Okay, so he brought his dad in. That's kind of what's going on here. And that's all. My friends, to the original people who read Genesis, this is the biggest moment of the story. This is what happens here. You've got the leader of the Hebrews, the first of the Hebrews, which is Jacob, meeting the leader of the Egyptians, and they've got a very complicated history with each other. Yet the first time they met in peace. Two cultures that are going to be at war for hundreds of years after this. Their first meeting is in peace. Pharaoh is going to be amazingly respectful to to Jacob. And Jacob is going to bless Pharaoh twice in this meeting. They met in peace. Now, so to us, that doesn't seem to be any big deal. But if you look at this in its historical context, this is huge. This is like, I can't even think of a modern example of this. But if you think about two families or two groups or two organizations or two political beliefs that have clashed for like as long as any of us can remember, if we could go back and tell their original story where the founders of those two things met in peace for the first time, it would be like, I don't want to use a political example because everybody gets bent out of shape with that, but I think you know what I'm saying. This is two people who are ideologically opposed. I mean, if you want to know how opposed the Hebrews and the Egyptians are, just skip ahead and read the next book of the Bible. It's called Exodus, and you'll find out just how much they hated each other. But remember all the story that happened. The adventure with Moses and the plagues and the destruction of Egypt and the enslavement and all these things. The first time these two cultures met, they met in peace with deep respect coming from both sides. If you read this, no attempt is made here to make Jacob look better than Pharaoh, and no attempt here is made to make Pharaoh look better than Jacob. And yes, the Hatfields and the McCoys. Yeah, it would be like finding out those two people, which I think, if I remember right, their original fight was over like a sheep or something, wasn't it? That's where the fight started. But it would be like if you go back to the patriarchs of those two families to find out they were originally friends and respectful to each other, and everybody's like, no way. Well, here it is. Jacob and Pharaoh, they didn't shake hands because that wasn't something they did back then, but I mean, it's the equivalent of that. And thanks, Christina. Are you talking about tonight or this morning? And appreciate it. So, yeah, but I think this is something you need to hang on to, especially eventually. I don't know when it's going to happen. We're going to have a sermon series on Moses. We're gonna have Moses sometime. I was thinking, we were going to do that maybe over this summer, but I don't know if that's going to pan out. But whenever we get to Moses, I want you to keep in mind the conflict between the Egyptians and the Hebrews. This is where it started. Not the conflict, but the relationship. The relationship started in peace. And you got Jacob and Pharaoh, for all intents and purposes, high-fiving each other. And so let's look at how the conversation goes. Then Joseph brought, in verse 7, then Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh immediately, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Walked right in the door and blessed, whatever kind of greeting or whatever it was, blessed him. He didn't try to hit him with a stick. He didn't try to stab him, which is what later generations would have thought they'd try to do because we hate each other. But no. The first thing Jacob did to Pharaoh was bless him. And look at the respectful question that then Pharaoh asked back. He says, how old are you? Pharaoh asked him. Jacob replied, I've traveled this earth for 130 hard years, but my life has been short compared to the lives of my ancestors. This is chit-chat, my friends. This is buddy talk. This is respectful. This is not like this and not like this. It is conversation like this. It is two people who are respecting each other, speaking respectfully, getting to know each other, being buddies, chumming around. Again, and this is where two cultures who end up hating each other, this is where they started. Something to think about. So they have this conversation, verse 10. Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh again before leaving his court. That's twice, 2 times. So Joseph, on behalf at Pharaoh's order, Joseph assigned the best of the land of Egypt, the region of Ramses, to his father and his brothers, and they settled there just as Pharaoh commanded. That's where they got started, my friends. And if we ever make it to Exodus, you're going to find out just how sour that relationship became. In fact, I'm going to show you how quickly and what happened to sour that relationship. But we'll get to that in just a second. All right, I know I'm moving fast because I really want to finish this tonight because I want to get to Job starting tomorrow. So we're going to turn the page. We're going now down to Genesis 48, which we're skipping 40. I don't know, somewhere. We're going to Genesis 48, and we're going down to verse 12. All right, a few things have happened since we leave off this conversation between Jacob and Pharaoh. Okay, they get out to Goshen. There's a blessing of all the sons from Jacob, and everybody's kind of going. So everybody's kind of not all right. So now Jacob and his family is kind of settled into Goshen. You know, they're kind of building it up, making stuff happen. Joseph goes back to the to his job overseeing the famine relief and all this stuff. Well, okay, so Joseph's working away. Jacob and the rest are kind of building their lives. Well, then Jacob's health starts to fail, and the guy is 130 years old. So his health starts to fail. They send message to Joseph. Things aren't going well, so Joseph, drops everything and runs out there. And so Jacob asks for permission to bless Joseph's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. He has to bless them and include them as a part of his. He's going to count them as his sons. So those 2 boys are going to receive an inheritance that from their grandfather, where normally it would have been Joseph. So those 2 boys are going to stand in the place of Joseph, which Joseph is fine with because he's got plenty of money. He didn't need it. So Joseph is kind of tied up. Now remember, so these, again, talking about where these 2 cultures met, 2 of the original 12 tribes were descendants of sons who were half Egyptian. Did I say that right? Yeah, I think I did. Their mothers was an Egyptian lady. And she was a daughter of one of the priests of On, if I recall properly. So these 2 boys who are going to be included as and they're listed right in there as 2 of the 12 tribes of Israel, Manasseh and Ephraim. They are half Egyptian. Their mothers are Egyptian. It was an Egyptian woman. So again, something to think about where we got started. So they're getting ready to bless it, and as I read this, you're going to understand why I included this in tonight's study. So you're going to see why we go here. I'm in chapter 48, Genesis 48, verse 12. I'm sorry. Let me set the stage here real quick. They're there to be blessed. Jacob's health is failing. He manages to sit up, and Joseph brings the 2 boys, Manasseh and Ephraim, in to be blessed. He positions them correctly so that the right hand goes on the older son, and here's what happens. Joseph moved the boys around who were at their grandfather's knees. Then he bowed with his face to the ground. Then he positioned the boys in front of Jacob. With his right hand, he directed Ephraim. With his right hand, he directed Ephraim toward Jacob's left hand, and with his left hand, he put Manasseh at Jacob's right hand. So obviously, if I'm facing you and I say, hold up your right hand and join it with my left hand, you're going to put your right hand up. I mean, you see how that works? So he has the older son here in this hand. He's got the younger son, and he pushes them both forward so that the older son gets the right hand. You guys all follow that? That's what's happening here. So Joseph took great pains to make sure the older son got the blessing. Then he, meaning Jacob, blessed Joseph and said, "May the God whom my grandfather Abraham and my father Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this very day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, may he bless these boys. May they preserve my name and the names of Abraham and Isaac, and may their descendants multiply greatly throughout the earth. But Joseph was upset when he saw his father had placed his right hand on Ephraim's head. So Jacob did this. He switched them. I lost my place. But Joseph, verse 17, but Joseph was upset when he saw his father place his right hand on Ephraim's head. So Joseph lifted it to move it to Ephraim's head, to Manasseh's head. So basically he was going to switch him. No, my father, Joseph said, this is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. Because the oldest brother is supposed to receive the blessing, right? Because he has all along, hasn't he? But his father refused. I know, my son, I know, he replied. Manasseh will also become a great people, but his younger brother will become even greater, and his descendants will become a multitude of nations. So I've been talking for a half an hour about how much Joseph has grown through this whole experience, how much he's learned. He doesn't have any shame. He's very pleased with his life. On and on and on and on. So it's time for you guys to jump in the chat. What has Jacob learned through this entire process? What has Jacob, the father Jacob, what has he learned by switching the blessing and blessing the younger son more than the older son? What has he learned? Jacob has issues with blessings. I don't know if I could have said it any better than that, Cool Hand Luke. Jacob struggles with that. Now, let me put this in the historical context, and I know we talked about this earlier on in this study. Remember who Jacob was. He also was a younger brother of an older brother named Esau, whom he spent his entire life trying to steal his birthright from. That's right, Suze. Nothing. That's right, Linda. Nothing. Doesn't look like he's learned anything, Christina. Not much, Candy. You are correct. Jacob's entire life, even almost before he was born, he was trying to steal switch the younger, older birthright thing. Teresa, he's still playing favorites. Scott, he's still playing favorites. You guys know this. Okay? He's still doing it. And it's funny, Joseph is even like, Dad? And Dad's like, nope, this is what I meant to do. And, so his whole life, at least he's consistent, I guess, even though he's frustrating people half to death. But still lifting that younger son up. At least in this case, it wasn't, lifting the younger son at the expense of the older son, because in Jacob and Esau, it was at the expense of the older son. With Joseph and the coat of many colors and the brothers and all that stuff, lifting Joseph up was at the expense of the older brothers. At least here, the older brother of these two, and let me make sure I'm saying this right. Manasseh being the older son. At least Manasseh is still becoming a great people. He's just not going to be as great as the younger son. Come on, Jacob. How much trouble have you caused with this? But here we are. So just proof that not everybody in the story learned a lesson. Okay. So verse 20. So Jacob blessed the boys that day with this blessing. The people of Israel will use your names when they give a blessing. They will say, may God make you as prosperous as Ephraim and Manasseh. In this way, Jacob put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Jacob said to Joseph, look, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and will take you back to Canaan, the land of your ancestors. And beyond what I have given your brothers, I'm giving you an extra portion of the land that I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow. So, inheritance details, all these things in here. But obviously, the lifting up of the younger brother is still a theme. That we still haven't gotten away from that. So, all right. So there we are. All right. Chapter 49 is all about Jacob now blessing all the sons. And I'm not going to go through all this because there's a lot of details here and things we could get into. But we're going to go ahead and pass on all that. We're going to skip down now to Genesis 50. And we're actually going to skip halfway through this. And basically all we're missing is Jacob blessing all the brothers, including Ephraim, Manasseh, and Joseph. So he blesses everybody. And then Jacob passes away. So that's kind of where we're at. So Joseph, and as we know today, the Egyptians were really good at embalming bodies. Again, we know that from archaeological evidence today. So they embalmed Jacob in the style of the Egyptians to preserve his body, and then they eventually take him and bury him. Okay, so all right, so let's go to we're going to Genesis chapter 50, verse 14. After burying Jacob, okay, so after all this happened, they buried Jacob. Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers, who had accompanied him to his father's burial. Okay, all makes sense. Everything seems fine. No indication of a problem. But of course, there is a problem. Verse 15. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became fearful. Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back for all the wrong we did to him. So, but in the back of their mind, they're still concerned that Joseph's going to turn on them. You know, they still have concern. I credit that to a couple things. First of all, I look at that as a recognition that the brothers know they messed up. They know that what they did to Joseph, even though Joseph said, hey, it was God and brought me here and canceled the famine. In the back of their mind, they're all going, you know, I don't know that I'd react that way. I don't know that I'd be all that thrilled about this. So now they're afraid that maybe Joseph was just being kind to them because Dad. Now Dad's gone, problems can happen. And I can tell you, as somebody who has walked with lots and lots and lots of families down through the years, I can tell you that when the matriarch or the patriarch of a family passes away, any ugliness that matriarch or patriarch has kind of kept under wraps blows up like a volcano. I have seen this in families, and it is ugly. It is ugly because now you got everybody who's upset about the person who passed away. Of course they are, but now also the person who kept the lid on some of this animosity is now gone too. And man, that is, whew. I mean, I've been at graveside services where I had to help break up fights. I mean, I've done that more times than I want to admit. Had to get between people, shouting matches at funerals, you know, siblings who won't come to mom's funeral because, you know, that stuff is real. And so now they have, Cheryl, it's a realistic fear. And Cool Hand Luke, you must have seen this too. It's a tragic thing. And the brothers are scared to death because basically the second most powerful person on earth is the person they're concerned about. So if Joseph decides that vengeance is going to be his, that could get ugly in a real hurry. And the brothers are saying, boy, I don't know what we would do about that. And you got it right, Anna Kay. That is a sad thing to see. So, all right. So the brothers now are I don't want to say conspiring. That's the wrong word. They're talking amongst themselves, thinking, you know, we better make sure that we okay with Joseph, because if Joseph decides he wants to take us out, there's going to be nothing we're going to do about it. So, all right, so they sent this message to Joseph. So they, you know, send him an email or something, and they say, before your father died, he instructed us to say to you. Okay, so on behalf of Dad told us to say this. Please forgive your brothers for the great wrong that they did to you, for their sin treating you so cruelly. Okay? Dad told us to say this. Did Dad tell them to say that? I didn't read anything in here where Dad said to say that, but whatever. So we, the servants of the God of your father, beg you to forgive our sins, or forgive our sin, singular sin. When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. Of course he did. I mean, we all sit here today and we understand. I mean, Cheryl here even said it, and I get it too. It's a realistic fear. And it would be scary to think that the second most powerful man on earth has it out for you. Nobody wants to live with that. But at the same time, how much of the red carpet has Joseph rolled out? How much of an olive branch has he extended to these guys? How much more open could his arms have been to them? You know, and he's thinking, is the only reason they've been tolerating me this whole time is because they were afraid of me? I don't want my family to be around me because they're intimidated by me. I don't want that. So obviously Joseph is upset because what this question says is we don't trust you and we are afraid. We are afraid of you. When Joseph says, guys, look, I might have raked you over coals a little bit when you got here, but I haven't given any indication that I'm going to be out to get you. So Joseph is upset. When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. Verse 18. So when Joseph is now, he's got his feelings hurt a little bit. Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. Look, we are your slaves, they said. But Joseph replied, don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me. I'll give you that one. But God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. It's a beautiful statement, isn't it? To the people who did so much harm to him, he says, dude, I'm not even taking care of you guys. I'm going to take care of your kids. Because I'm the second wealthiest man around. And I don't want us to worry. I don't want you to worry about me, guys. I don't want that. We're brothers, and that's how we're gonna. We may have struggled with that for a while, but that's how it's going to be. So Joseph reassured them by speaking kindly to them. So Joseph and his brothers and their families continued. Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph lived to the age of 110. He lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his son Ephraim, and he lived to see the birth of the children of Manasseh's son Machir, whom he claimed as his own. Soon I will die, Joseph told his brothers. God will surely come, help you, and lead you out of this land of Egypt. That, my brothers and sisters, is what we call prophecy. Because you have to remember when this story became popular. This story was an oral tradition that was passed down by the Hebrews for many generations. Probably wasn't written down until the events of the book of Exodus. So while the people, and I told you how big of a deal it was that the story is told that Jacob and Pharaoh were respectful and blessed each other. That's where the story started. But this oral tradition, started long before the slavery in Egypt, but it was written down to be preserved during the slavery in Egypt because they wanted these details preserved. Why? Because it's such an incredible story. But that's why it was recorded and preserved so that, it would be here for future generations, including, these Americans in St. Mary's in 2020 who are, locked in their houses in a quarantine could study this story and say, gosh, the themes here still speak. The truth here still works. And that's what he wanted to see. So for Joseph, who'd done so much for the nation of Egypt, for him to say, someday God's going to lead you out. I want you to hear that through the ears of somebody who's suffering in slavery in Egypt. That detail would have been very important. Kuan Luke says, sometimes people can't understand mercy and grace. They only understand revenge. Sure, because revenge is simple. Absolutely. And the brothers got that. And they knew how simple that would be. So, yep. So they understood that. So, all right. Soon I will die, Joseph told his brothers, but God will surely come help you and lead you out of the land of Egypt. He'll bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath, and he said, when God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. So Joseph died at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. And I don't have the scripture reference, but when Moses led the people out of Egypt, 400 years later, they took the bones of Jacob with them. I mean, it says that right in Exodus. You can go look it up. So they kept this promise for, probably close to 500 years. And that's pretty impressive. Now, and I want you to know what I just read to you was the end of the book of Genesis. The very last verse of Genesis is Genesis 50:26. So this is the end of the book of Genesis. If you're following along in your Bible, simply turn the page, and here's what you'll find. You will find the book of Exodus. And if you look at Exodus chapter 1, you'll see that Exodus chapter 1 begins with an extremely brief account of Joseph, or actually a brief account of Jacob, I should say, where all the brothers' names are listed, and there's a few details. 8 verses. 8 verses. We're told that the Hebrews, the Israelites, who were living in Goshen, were so blessed. Things were going so well, and they were so prosperous that the Egyptians started to worry about them. And then comes verse 8 that says, then there was a king who rose to power in Egypt who knew nothing of Joseph. And things went downhill in a hurry. The Egyptians and their world-dominating power that they had was preserved only by an Israelite, Joseph. He enabled them to sustain all this power. And what did they do with it? They used it to enslave the very people who delivered them out of the problem. And God came in and said, this nation is done. And that's what the book of Exodus is all about. God crushing the nation he saved through the Israelites. And, it's just a fascinating story. And you can imagine why this story would have been so powerful to the people living in exile, the people who were in slavery in Egypt for 400 years, for them to realize that the only reason this happened is because the Egyptians forgot how they got here. And now God's going to send us a new champion. He sent us Joseph to save us from the famine. Now we're going to raise a new champion who is going to save us from the power of the Egyptians. And that was a guy who stuttered named Moses. And what a great story he is too. We're gonna do something with Moses. In my entire career, I've never had a sermon series on Moses. He's the only major biblical character I've not had a sermon series on at all. I've preached on Moses before, obviously, but never took time like I am with Ruth right now to spend with Moses. And Moses is awesome. What an awesome story he is. So I'd like to have some time to do that. But you can't really understand Moses until you understand Joseph and how important Joseph was to set up Moses to become the person that we know today. So, my friends, that's all she wrote, or he wrote, or whoever wrote. That's where we are. That's the story of Joseph. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you all. The 37 of you logged in right now, man. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much for sharing your evenings here with me. I hope if you got any comments or anything you want to put in the chat, let's love some little feedback from you, because feedback, I feel like I'm here in my office talking to myself. So I'm sorry I haven't done a very good job of interacting with you, but the chat is so hard for me to interact with. So if you got anything you'd like to, whatever, say, jump in there now and say it. So that's Joseph. Just like to know if you enjoyed his story. The plan is then starting tomorrow night, we are now going to transition to Job. So we're going to be jumping in history. Job came long before Jacob, or I'm sorry, well, yeah, before Jacob and Joseph. And I'm gonna do some working this up tomorrow, and see if I can present this. Probably be now one of the things that will be different between studying Joseph and studying Job is there won't be as much history in Job. Job is very much a theological book. So where we won't be learning quite as much history, we're going to be learning a lot of the nature of God and how we humans look at God and how we perceive of God and what it means to pray, what it means to have faith, what it means to endure adversity, what it means to answer critics. Much more actually practical stuff will come from Job than what came from Joseph. So it will be a different kind of study. Probably will allow for a little more interaction than Joseph did, because history is usually pretty straightforward. Either they did it or they didn't. And that's really the only question. Where Job, man, he puts out a ton of very deep and moving questions that challenge faith, challenge our belief system, challenge how we perceive the world around us. And I think you'll really enjoy that. Like I said, because Job is very self-contained. Joseph, he's mentioned in other places. He's connected to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. His story leads into the Exodus. Very connected. Job, he's mentioned like twice outside of this book. So Job is a very self-contained book. So there won't be much perspective. And if you go read some of the scholarly stuff on Job, you're going to find out that most scholars can't even agree when they think the story took place, or when it was popular, when it was famous, when it was written down. There's a lot of authors and a lot of scholars out there that think Job may be the oldest writing of the Old Testament, even long before Genesis. So I'm talking the recorded copy. Obviously, Job didn't exist before creation, obviously. But I mean, as far as stuff getting written down, the story of Job would have been far older than some of the other stories we have. So Job is a hard book, Cool Hand Luke. It is. I'm going to tell you that right now. And I'm planning to do this study in a week, but we may need to slow down because Job is a very difficult book to have sermons on. Now, I know, yes, I did the Easter Sunday sermon on a quote from Job, but it's very hard to do because there are very few excerpts. I can read. I can read. 1 Corinthians 13, and I could say, "Love is patient, love is kind, keeps no record of wrongs," and you all get that. And I could read those 8 verses, and we can learn it and everything, and it's very valuable. Where Job, every word of Job is so interwoven to the whole story. It's hard to have sermons on Job because it doesn't cut into segments very well. So it's gonna be an interesting study. I'm really looking forward to walking through this book with you. So, and I appreciate that, Crystal. Thank you. You couldn't be more welcome. You guys honor me by being here, and I appreciate that. Thanks, Miriam. Let's see, Dave. Really enjoyed it. I'm glad you were here. Glad you learned a lot. You're welcome, Tina. Candy. Always good to teach the teacher, so I appreciate that. Nikki, thank you. Angie, really looking forward to the sermon series on Moses. We really enjoyed Joseph. Still looking at that for over the summer. We're gonna have to see how this quarantine thing goes. Enjoy the detail in the chat. Thanks, Teresa. Well, Bill, you're welcome. The Old Testament, at least through the first 5 books, is very much a building on itself. So that's great. Joseph was a great study. Thanks, Linda. Well, these stories are very much alive. All I'm doing is telling you about them. I'm not really doing anything creative here. I'm just trying to open these stories to you so you can step inside of them and see what's going on, because I think that is extremely valuable. So, yeah, Kuhan Luke, you're certainly welcome. And yeah, so yep, Cheryl, you're welcome. Are you serious? Is there a hand washing emoji? Is that for real? Yeah. Trina, these chats make them more like real people that you can relate to. You want to know why? Because they are real people we relate to, especially the Old Testament characters. There's only one biblical character that's perfect, and that's Jesus. And that's only because he was the Son of God. The rest of these guys are very, very real and extremely relatable. And all they are is about being faithful in the midst of crazy life. And oh, could you hear the church bells ringing? Yep, it's 9:00. It's time for Tim to shut up, and he's still talking. Yeah. So an organ solo to open the study tomorrow. I make one offhand comment this morning during First Light, and now I got to play the organ sometime. I'm not making any promises about organ music. So, yeah, that's what we keep Daryl and Gene around here for. They're way better at that than I am. So, all right, cool. Well, I am so glad to have. There's 36 of you logged in here right now. I am so happy to have you guys as a part of this journey. It means the world to me that you think enough of this to be here every night. And I appreciate it just more than I can even tell you. It just warms my heart. I look forward to this all day. So, yep, tomorrow night we're going to start Job. Any questions or anything you want to have about Job or whatever, jump on and you guys know how to find me. Just let me know and appreciate it. Also, as a reminder, I'm going to be here at the church from 5:30 to 7 tomorrow. That's the plan. So if you want to stop by, just know I'll be here. I'll be down by the sanctuary at the door. And you're welcome to stop in and just say hi, drop off anything you want to drop off, whatever. I'll just know that I'll be here. And you're welcome, Daryl. You can play the Batman theme song. Yeah, I can play that on the organ. Of course, that might be a little on the nose, but you're welcome, Eric, and you're welcome, Scott, and you're welcome too, Kim. So thank you, guys. All right, I want you all to go get some sleep. Another big day tomorrow. Maybe a big announcement coming about next Sunday here soon. The one we talked about last night. Some of the details for the parking lot service next Sunday seem to be coming together. So keep that in your prayers. And Teresa, you couldn't be more welcome. And Amy's gone with the thug emoji and the hand washing. So there you all go. You're welcome, Bill Har. Thanks for the masks you brought me today too. All right, you guys. Hey, I love you all very much. Again, you honor me with your presence here on these evenings. Thank you for sharing your evening with me. Everybody stay safe. Keep up the good work. Get ready for Job tomorrow night. We're planning to look at, I can tell you tomorrow night, we're planning to look at chapters 1 and 2. We'll see how much we get through. But I appreciate you guys very much. And you know what you need to do now? Go wash your hands.